And here we go on Fantasy Football Today Express, talking about the biggest busts in fantasy for 2024. Adam and Jamey here. All right, Jamey, let's talk about some busts. Do you have any at the quarterback position?
Yeah, I have three. Their names are Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts. And because they're all going in round 2, I just don't like it. So I'm not going to be drafting them, and I think you're making a mistake by drafting them that soon.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like, we say that a lot. Does it end up playing out that way at the end of the year? Where I feel like, you know what, they're pretty damn good. And a lot of the guys I drafted ahead of them are pretty bad. You know what I mean?
It definitely is all about what do you put around the quarterbacks and the build that you end up with. Clearly, Mahomes last year was a bust. Joe Burrow, who I believe was going as a top 5 quarterback, at least early in the process, was a bust. I think if you ended up with a guy that finished the season strong or was a consistent producer from a later spot, Dak Prescott, for example, Jordan Love, for example, Brock Purdy, for example, any of those guys probably won you a lot of fantasy leagues based on how they performed based on their draft costs. So it's going to be, probably people that are pro drafting QBs early are going to argue against that. People that are going to, wait on the position and end up, benefiting from that are going to argue that side of it. So that's usually the side I come out on most of the time. And I just think drafting those quarterbacks in that high of a range. And like I said, I don't think we're done. I don't think, seeing them 22, 23, 24. I think right now, last ADP review I did, it was 22, 23, 25. I think they're going to get closer to the top 15.
All right. I'm not quite as convinced of that just because I am consistently seeing ADP showing them in the 3rd round in a lot of different websites. And
I'm only looking at ours. So that's all I can go by.
That would be a huge distinction because in the 3rd round, I don't know, would you still think they're a bust in like the middle if they fall to the mid round 3?
Not as much. So right now they're holding pretty strong right now. Actually, no, we've seen a downturn. So Mahomes is still at 22. Allen is now fallen to 29 and Hurts is 30. This is overall. So their ADP is 29. And for Mahomes, it is 27. So maybe you're right.
I don't know if I'm right. Well, we shall see. There have not been a lot of drafts being done right now, but I don't know. I'm surprised that they might be available in the 3rd round because I know how people typically draft, but I do think another part of that is like the excitement for CJ Stroud, the excitement for Anthony Richardson, for Caleb Williams, for Jaden Daniels, for Brock Purdy. I mean, the value late is really good.
If we're just going by performance and just taking ADP out of the equation, the guy that's starting to scare me a little bit is Dak because the longer CeeDee Lamb holds out, the more nervous I get.
I think you got to probably put Purdy in that discussion too, because he's got a left tackle and a wide receiver holding out.
He's not being drafted quite as high, but yes, he's getting dangerously close to that range.
How about running back busts?
Typically for me, I'm going to lean toward the, guys that are getting drafted too soon. So Aaron Jones makes me very nervous being drafted as a starter. Raheem Mostert still being drafted as a starter's range. Both those guys, 29, 32 for 29 for Jones, 32 for Mostert. James Conner's in that range as well, still being drafted a little bit too high. So those are guys I tend to avoid based on where they're being selected. Trying to think performance guys that make me really nervous for a bust perspective. It's really just those guys based on their cost.
Okay. I think if you take one of them, do you try to take their handcuff? Or do you try to take their handcuff without taking?
Yeah, I don't typically take those guys just because of, again, where they're being selected. You can't really handcuff Mostert because I think the better guy goes first. So it's a little surprising to me that Mostert still gets drafted as a number 2 running back. For Jones, I have not drafted Aaron Jones once. Now, we just did a half PPR mock draft where he really fell. And I was tempted to take him just because he fell. But I just usually draft Ty Chandler. I think you drafted Chandler, if I'm not mistaken, in that draft, which I was pissed about.
Yeah.
Did you? Yeah.
I don't know. I just being like Chandler Bing. I don't know.
Bing. Nice. And then in the case of James Conner, I do draft a lot of Trey Benson. So I don't usually take both those guys.
Let's see if I took Ty Chandler. I did not. I was going to. But Schaefer took him one pick before me, and then I took Khalil Herbert. All right, we're going to take a break here. I'll take that.
Yes, the other Ty Chandler fan.
Yes, exactly. We'll take a break, and then we'll come back and talk about wide receiver busts after this on Fantasy Football Today Express. All right, Jamey, who are some busts at the wide receiver position?
Yeah, again, for me, the older receivers. So Devontae Adams, Mike Evans are two guys that I tend to avoid. Just not drafting a lot of them based on where they are in their careers. They'll still be very good, and again, and I know you like to push back on this, but we're talking 5 or 6 spots based on ADP, and that's kind of where I have it ranked versus the position versus ADP, excuse me. But I just don't really have the expectation that there's going to be a lot of upside for those guys because of what we've seen. 63 receivers since 2014, age 31 years or older. Only 8 have finished in the top 12. And I just don't think the upside is there for them as they enter this portion of their careers. We saw it for Adams last year, dropped 4 points per game. Evans actually was better than a lot of people expected, but he's somebody that is just, you're hearing a lot of Jalen McMillan talk. That's another outside receiver that's going to take away some production. You're hearing obviously a lot of Chris Godwin talk because he's moving back to the slot. So competition for targets there and step back for him. I think both those guys are going to be around 14 to 15 PPR points per game. Taking them back into round 2, early part of round 3 is not something I'm planning to do. And I know Evans is starting to fall a little bit. So his ADP may settle in a good enough spot, but still somebody that I tend to avoid.
Yeah, I don't push back, by the way, on the 6 spots and ADP, versus ADP versus rankings. That is a big deal at that point in the draft. That there's some really good players that you could be passing up. So I totally get what you're saying there. And how about
Stephon Diggs, another one, same thing. Just age, and I think the other 2 guys are better.
I don't know. I mean, I'm out on Evans for the most part. I'm not as out on Adams and Diggs. I just we don't have time for it. But I still think Adams is going to get just a ton of targets. And a lot of talent evaluators still consider him one of the best receivers in football. So they don't seem to pin last year's on him. Right. Will he be again this year?
Now, that's sorry. Older and quarterback play. I'm nervous.
Okay. Tight ends.
I'm trying to think who scares me the most at that position. That's not just TJ Hawkinson. No, Kelsey doesn't scare me. I'm not going to draft him first. I'm starting to get a little skittish with Kittle just because of, if he's the 6th tight end, I don't want that. We've seen his points per game decline, 5 years in a row. And if Ayuk is healthy and if Debo's healthy, and right now Debo hasn't missed a practice in training camp, so hopefully that's a sign of things to come. Can you really trust Kittle to continue to be as great as he has been? Because he's so efficient.
Yeah. Man, those top 8 tight ends, I would guess 4 or 5 of them are probably going to hit. There will be some busts in there. I just don't know who. It's kind of hard to say. Man.
Well, Pitts is the obvious one if you want to go that route. But it just feels like there's going to be fun year for Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, he's not even going that early.
Njoku's somebody that I don't. Right, Njoku's somebody I don't want to draft. But he's a borderline top guy. I found so far, and ADP is going to determine this. Because I write sleepers, breakouts, and busts the most. I think of our crew, that there's not a lot of top end guys that I really am trying to avoid.
That's how I feel too. I had so much trouble with busts when I was forced to, against my will, write a bust article. Yeah, and I also think because the industry is throws out all the same names, it's really hard to go. Who are your breakouts? Well, they're being drafted as breakouts. I can't I'm not getting value on these guys. It's just I don't know. Everyone's kind of on the same page. Sleepers, breakouts, and busts is getting more difficult because we do it so early in the process and everyone has sort of the same names. But my advice to you with the tight ends is just to draft all 8 of them. Some of them will certainly hit, and you'll cover your bases. All right, that's Jamey. I'm Adam. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you on Monday on Fantasy Football Today Express.